Welcome to Above and Below, the podcast of the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention. My name is Sonya Bohmann, and I am their executive director. Unfortunately, my sidekick is not joining us today, so no Zalk Malik, so no crazy shenanigans, but I do have an amazing guest today. Welcome to Above and Below, Tim. I'd love to have you introduce yourself.
Hi, Sonya. Thank you for having me on today. I've listened to most of the podcasts already, and I absolutely love them. My name's Tim Irving, and I just recently retired from OSHA. And my role at OSHA was the deputy director for the Directorate of Construction. For conversation purposes, we'll call it the construction division because that's how most people know it. But I retired this year after serving 1 year as the acting director at DOC, the Directorate of Construction. And our mantra at DOC was protecting workers and saving lives. But as you can imagine, that's not my first calling. When I was in high school, I didn't dream of going to the Department of Labor at OSHA and becoming the director of the construction division. I'm an electrician by trade.
Okay.
And I graduated from a vocational school. I usually follow that up with, if I was any good at being an electrician, I'd probably still be doing it. But I co-owned a small electrical contracting firm in the Boston area in the mid 1980s. So I think I just dated myself there.
Okay,
and I had that I had that company for 7 years. And as a small business owner, you can imagine that the people working for you aren't just workers. They're not just employees. They're usually the friends or family members. At one point, my brother was working for me. At one point, my dad worked for me. We had 10 employees, 5 licensed electricians, 5 journeymen, because law requires you have 1-to-1 ratio there.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So for you can't just send an apprentice out. You need to send them with a journeyman.
Well, that would make sense, especially in electrical.
It definitely does make sense, and it's not one of the rules that I ever played with there.
Sure.
So the short version of the story is that one Thursday morning I sent 2 of the licensed electricians out to install a bus duct switch. Now, for the listeners, a bus duct switch is a big switch that goes on the distribution system within a building. The 2 electricians that I sent out there installed over 100 of these switches in this particular building. Well, I sent them out there to install the bus duct switch. They had a problem installing it. And as any construction worker does, we're paying them to install the switch. They're going to install the switch no matter what it takes. It didn't quite fit in, and they started modifying it a little bit to get it to fit. And when they did, and they pushed it into the riser, it exploded.
Oh my goodness.
They were burnt over 40% of their body, both of them.
Oh.
First and second degree burns. With that whole experience kind of taught me or got me into the safety business. That's what started my journey, because after all the lawsuits in the workers' comp claims and everything else there, I went looking for someone to help me. I went in and I looked in the Boston Yellow Pages, and I looked up safety.
Now that might be where you dated yourself. We might have to explain to our listeners what a Yellow Pages are.
So, good point. So there were 18 pages of electricians listed in the Boston Yellow Pages, and only 1 listing for safety risk management.
Wow.
And that's when I decided to get into safety. Now, the other part of that is that the switch was actually manufactured wrong. So when they started manipulating it and forced it in, when that created that explosion, for years, I wondered how they blew themselves up. And it took me 5 or 6 years, maybe even longer, before I realized that they didn't blow themselves up. I was the one responsible for it. I was the one that had the legal obligation as the owner of the company. But not only that, I had a moral obligation
Sure.
to, I don't want to use their names, but
Right. To protect them.
to protect them because one of them is still in the industry. I found out many years later, after I started my journey within the suicide prevention, that one of them did die by suicide
Oof.
based on this accident. And it took 5 or 6 years, but it affected his life. And I felt morally responsible, even though I didn't lose any lawsuits or anything like that. I decided that I was going to change careers, help other small businesses focus on safety and health. And again, you got to think this is the 1980s now. And actually, at this point, it was the early 1990s. And when I think back, we were barely wearing hard hats back then.
Right.
As safety
It was
glasses,
a whole different conversation.
we were still wearing shorts and everything else. But so that actually got me started in safety. And after a short stint in the private sector, I ended up joining OSHA in the Boston South office as a construction expert. So, and I never looked back after that. So.
So, have you always tied the safety piece to the mental health piece for you? Or at what point, I know you had just mentioned that you got involved in suicide prevention, but what was that switch for you?
Oh, and I remember it quite clearly. It was 2015,
Okay.
and I was the assistant regional administrator in the Boston OSHA office. Well, the stand down to prevent falls in construction. There goes, you have to
Sure.
say it properly and working for the agency. The fall stand down was about 3 years old. And in the region, we were fully participating. And as the ARA, I wanted to make sure I had current documentation of the falls that are happening locally, whether it was Massachusetts or any of the 6 New England states. I got a document across my desk. It was the Fatal Injuries at Work report that was issued by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. And I just opened it up to categories. I'm looking at it, and the report was issued in 2015, but it had statistics 2011, 12, 13. I look at 2011, yes, falls were the number one cause, but number two was suicide.
Mm.
This is occupationally, this isn't
Yeah.
public health, this is
Right.
occupational health. And then in 2012, it was number two again to falls. But in 2013, it was in the state of Massachusetts, it was the number one cause of fatal occupational injuries. Now, I prided myself as a safety professional, and I still do. I was mad. I was mad. I was embarrassed that not only didn't I know suicide was number two on the list, I didn't even know it was an option.
Right.
And
Nobody was talking about it. Nobody.
nobody.
Mhm.
So I belong to a couple roundtables of safety professionals in Eastern Mass. I brought it to them and I
Mm.
asked how many people are aware of suicide as the leading cause of death occupationally in Massachusetts. Nobody raised their hand.
Now, what was
So,
that conversation like? Were people like, why are you bringing this up? Why are we
yes,
talking about this?
there was a violent, not a violent
Like
reaction,
a
but it
visceral
was,
reaction,
it was,
probably.
so one of the rules we had at this round table was it had to be an OSHA connection. We can't talk
Mm,
about, you can't sell products, you can't sell
sure.
insurance.
Hmm.
It was an OSHA related. I remember the guy's arm shooting up. This is, can I say
Yeah. Why are we
bullshit? Can
talking
I
about
say
this?
bullshit? Why are we
Yeah.
talking about this? This isn't our issue. This is not our issue. This
Wow.
is
Yep.
not going to
That's
happen.
surprising. Yeah.
The chairman of the alliance
Mhm.
then stood up in this totally unscripted and said, "Do you remember the accident on Deer Island? And there was a load being lifted up into the hole. Deer Island was a very large project here in Boston. The operator lost the load and it killed two workers in the hole. 2 days later, the operator died by suicide." And he told that story because he was the one involved with it. And from that point on, no one really questioned, because once we started talking about it,
Hmm.
it just kept rolling. I
Right.
didn't have to ask the questions. People were like, "It's about time we're talking about this. Oh my
Nice.
goodness, my friend this, my brother this, my
Yeah.
father this." So
So, do you have other experiences too of that shift that had to happen with people? Because you've been talking about this before talking about this was cool, so to speak, right? People think this is a new conversation, but SP started after a magazine article in 2015. You started having these conversations in 2015. This is not a new conversation. It
no.
now has, I think, post COVID, it's more of an accepted conversation. But what did some of those early conversations sound like?
First of all, I want to give a shout out. In I think if you did a search of the name mentioned most on this podcast, besides you,
Unsolved.
is going to be Cal Bayer.
Yes.
So it
Yeah.
Cal in Dr. Sally.
Hmm.
So I do need to give definite kudos to them, because I honestly think that it started at the same time. Now, my realm was the federal government. Cal and Sally, Dr. Sally, were our private sector.
Hmm.
I knew that I had an opportunity to make a serious change because of the position I held in New England. One of my mentors always told me, she said, "Tim, do not ever start a project without getting top leadership support and approval before you start." So I started with just in Region 1. I started with Galen Blanton, Jeff Erskine. I sat in a room and just talked to them about it. And I didn't talk about opioids. I didn't talk about traumatic stress. I just talked about suicide prevention. And it caught their attention. So this was definitely not something I was doing alone. We had a lot of people working with it.
Hmm.
Once I secured the support of the top leadership, I then needed to start socializing it. So I got permission to to start putting this forward. But the key items that I needed was data. Anything in the government, you need data. I had the report from CFMA, not the
Hmm.
report, the article,
Yep.
which was supporting evidence. But in 2016, when the
Yeah.
CDC first published and made their connections,
It
that's
changed
when
everything.
I took the Mass Department of Public Health in the CDC in the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. So the CDC is the public health.
Hmm.
The Bureau of Labor and Statistics was occupational health. And I basically just said 5.6% of all occupational fatalities are suicides. They had over 260 the year we were talking about it. I said, what are we doing about it? Our funding from Congress is based on how well we do reducing the fatality rate. We're not even looking at 5%. We have our head in the sand. The attitude quickly changed. I'm trying to think of some of the resistance we got. Number one, OSHA is funded by the Appropriations Act. We're not allowed to spend money on things that are outside of our jurisdiction, which is
Oh,
this whole thing had to go through an ethics review to make sure
wow.
that it fell within. I was perfectly comfortable believing it, but I did have to do a presentation to the Solicitor of Labor talking about it. And green light,
Let's
green
just
light
talk
from
about
there.
that for a second. That you had to go through a review committee to get the government to recognize that mental health is safety. Like, that's really where this process has had to go through.
Yes. But you also realize there's good reason for that because we have SAMHSA, we have HHS. There are other organizations spending money on suicide prevention.
Sure. Agreed.
So I had to convince them, or they had to be convinced that it was occupational. And honestly, that was the easiest argument to have internally at the level with the assistant regional administrators, like me, Nick, Karina, Lorik. There were 10 of us. 3 of them fought back, said, nope, not us.
Wow.
We're not mental health specialists. We're physical health. We do physical safety. We're not training our people. We're not spending our money on this. We have falls. We have ladders. We have the heat. Heat just started back then too. So, and there were legitimate concerns. I mean, I'm not a mental health expert. A lot of people think I am now, but it's no. I had to know when I needed to turn over the reins as
Sure.
well.
So is that when, I mean, you were very instrumental in creating the alliance between OSHA and AFSP. And that's, interestingly enough, part of how I came into this conversation, because I was volunteering for AFSP at the time and started presenting for Nick, who is Nick DeJesse, who is one of your colleagues at OSHA.
Yeah.
Nick's been on our podcast as well.
I did. I listened to that one this morning.
Last September.
We just began by socializing the topic. I'm not sure how many of the listeners will be familiar with Edgar Schein about cultural movements. He's an expert in management and culture, in how to change culture within organizations. And he had a blueprint. And I literally just followed it by starting to socialize the conversation. What are you talking about? Oh, we can talk about that? Yeah, this is what we're doing. We had colleagues from Mass Department of Public Health, AFSP, the Mass Consultation Program, and we ended up all creating this 90-minute PowerPoint presentation that we presented once, and then the government union said, can you present that again? We need more people to see this. It just snowballed. The requests were coming in unbelievable. And we were doing regional conferences. I did the National VPP conference, Voluntary Protection Program Participants Association.
That's a mouthful.
So,
I know when I presented for them, I was like, you guys with all the letters.
Yeah. So, but the turning point within the agency did actually start in 2018. I was on a national compliance assistance call. One of the other directorates, the cooperative and state programs, asked me to present the work we were doing. When I presented that, after I hung up, 2 people called me. Nick was the first one to call me, says, we can do this? This is awesome. Let's go. And Karina Lorik said, let's go. And Nick worked in the Philadelphia area. Karina reached out to AFSP also she was expecting just a small session with construction workers, and she included law enforcement as well. And I told her the advice I gave to everyone starting out, if you think you're going to get 20, move the decimal point, because I don't know what it is with this topic, but it's drawing
Mhm.
a lot of people. And sure as heck, Karina had over 200 people in 2019 at a safety
Mhm.
suicide prevention session, which was then the catalyst that started the OSHA Suicide Prevention Stand Down Week.
Mhm.
The first week, held in 2020, 1,000 people registered and noticed
Yeah.
it was from 15
Mhm.
different states. They tracked all the documents. Again, in the government, if you don't have numbers, don't bother presenting it. So you
Mhm.
need to track all of it. Fast forward to 2025, Karina and the stand down, the suicide prevention stand down, had over 500,000 participants
Amazing.
in 50 states. So,
Amazing.
and territories.
Absolutely
So
amazing. Yeah. So that has to be a huge sense of pride for you to have introduced that conversation and really moved a needle that clearly needs to be moved.
in yeah, yeah, I think one of the things that I'm most proud of is, and it was one of the items that I helped push across the finish line right before I retired, was that in 2024, the Department of Labor, it's not like the White House reached out to DOL. They didn't reach out to Tim
Mhm.
Irving, but
Yeah.
they reached out to the Department of Labor. And then the assistant secretary called me and said, Tim, we're being asked by the White House to do this. There's no saying no. You are to develop 3 items to put in the federal action plan. Now,
Wow.
as it relates to occupational safety. Now,
Mhm.
the last time the National Strategy for Suicide Prevention was updated was 2012. There are several documents that are part of this plan. And I think it was such a big deal for me because we now got it recognized as an occupational injury, not just public health. It is
Right.
now occupational.
Yeah.
So getting the 3 items in that plan, that's now a 10-year plan. So even though now I'm gone from the agency, I still have another 7, 8 years to those items in that plan that
Amazing.
every federal agency must strive for.
Hmm.
So,
That's
and
incredible.
I know CIASP is listed in the national strategy, the one
Yep.
that's available to the public. And that's such a big deal to have it
Yes.
recognized as occupational
Yes.
safety as well.
That's huge. That is absolutely incredible. And now that we have it recognized in the government, I guess my next question for you is what has to change for us to make this a normalized conversation within just our industry?
I think I can only speak within the government bubble, really. Yes, I was in the Directorate of Construction, but all honesty, I haven't been on a construction site in 40 years.
You know
But
construction people,
I
right? You
I
know
do
how
know
they think. You
I
have been
do.
in safety for so long. You're now consulting in safety. What's the conversation have to look like? Like, how do we turn the page? We're getting there, but how do we make it as much of a conversation as falls or all of the talk around helmets and hard hats?
I think we're beyond the socialization aspect of cultural change because we've already been talking about it. You have to really have your head in the sand not to be listening, hearing this. We have the websites and the information out there. Now, I honestly think that we need to reach some of the smaller employees. Just like I'm in a bubble, we all have our own bubbles of communication. I think the small employers, because if you look at the demographics of the construction industry, a, a lot of them have fewer than 20 employees. just like the business I had.
Yeah.
And with construction, I know it's been talked about on other podcasts, but if you're in recovery, this has been changing. But what used to happen was you'd be fired. And then a lot of times you couldn't get a job. But with the construction industry, you have a pickup truck, a ladder, and a couple screw guns. You can start your company.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people that did not have other options have done. And I think there still is a stigma out
Hmm.
there, that little negative belief about people in recovery or about mental health issues. So we do need to work on breaking down some of the stigma as well.
What's the one thing that someone can do in a small company to do that? What would you tell them to do first?
Reach out to CIASP, reach out to AFSP. One I didn't mention is the Construction Research Training Center. It's CPWR. It's NIOSH.
SAMHSA.
S-
There's great
s-
resources in all of them.
They're there. And again, it's just breaking through that bubble. And unfortunately, just like physical safety, I don't think things move until after the fact. And it's sad, but when a company does experience a suicide or an overdose or someone with the mental health issues, until they're personally affected, it's somebody else's issue. And
Absolutely.
so I think, again, stigma, but I would send them to your website. Now, AFSP also just started Hard Hat Courage.
Hmm.
Are you familiar with Hard Hat Courage? It's
Yeah.
their website. They have resources, educational materials on there. Basically, right out of the box, you can download them. So, and
Absolutely.
I don't know. Yeah, I won't go to the there's different organizations. I think the
There's so many of them.
organizations they complement each other.
Hmm. Well, that's what I would say. And that's kind of what we say when we present about this is that find something you can align with, whether it's us, it's AFSP, it's CPWR, it's NAMI. I don't care. As long as you are able to connect with something, we all complement each other. We all work together in many ways. We sit on alliances together. We want to save lives, and we don't care what resource you use to do that.
But that attitude has changed as well. Because when I did first start this, there were people that would not walk in
Silos.
the room. Yep, they were in the silos. And I don't know who broke down the silos, but somebody did. And I think it was the fact that this affects everybody, not just the electrician, the plumber, the
Right.
carpenter. It
Mhm.
it affects the project manager. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
you know.
So we like to end our calls on a positive note. So give me the one highlight that you've seen in this conversation that has started changing the tide.
Can I do one that was not in the conversation?
Yes, absolutely.
Because
Yep.
I truly think that what we have been focused on, I'm speaking, I still speak for the agency. That's a
That's
long
okay.
time. So one thing OSHA has is they talk about the focus four. And I look at, I'm an electrician by trade. When the electrical fatalities, yes, the injuries are still happening. When the electrical fatalities are so far below the opioid overdose, the unintentional overdoses, and the suicide, something's got to be changing. We spent so much money on the focus four. It needs to be changed. It needs to be focus five, six, seven,
Sure.
suicide, opioids, traumatic stress. This has already started to roll. One of the items that, again, I'm real happy with is that the workplace mental health publication that OSHA publishes is now part of the OSHA 10 and 30-hour introductory courses. Again, the behind the scenes I don't want to say fighting, but it was fighting.
It
And
was.
I
Yeah.
have to give Jeff Erskine from Region 1 credit for this because he says, why aren't we talking about this in this class? This is ridiculous. We've got 500,000 construction workers through these classes every year. This is now huge.
Incredible. Yep.
And the issue was, oh, the instructors aren't trained in it. Well, they don't have to be trained in it. This is just hand out the publication. If
Hmm.
you are comfortable talking about it, talk about it. I think that was fantastic. So that will also help with it. So
Absolutely. It will make a huge difference. And that I know when I joined this organization 3 years ago, that was something people were talking about is can we get this into the OSHA 10 and OSHA 30 training? So that is a huge step in the right
yeah,
direction for
yeah.
sure.
At OSHA, OSHA's broken up into so many directorates. There's construction, there's general industry, there's human resources, there's communication. I will say on this topic, there was one OSHA. I have never seen the agency, such a large bureaucracy, rally around one topic. It took a while, but all 10 regions, the 8 directorates, everybody played a role in getting this topic
Amazing.
to where it is within the government anyway. So
That's incredible. Well, thank you for being with us today and sharing all of your knowledge. We will wrap up with one final question, and it is one, if you are a listener, that you know we always ask, and that is, what is your word of the year?
I have a growth mindset. And with that, I have 5 decision points that I always use. They're in this order. They're health, friends, family, personal growth, and professional competence. Everything I do revolves around those 5 items. If any of them are negatively affected, it changes my decision process. Where I just retired, my highlight and word of the year is friends. I want to concentrate on spending time with people that want to be with me and that I want to be with. Retirement's a lot different from what I was just doing. I realized that when I was in Washington, I needed to make a few more connections or reconnect back with my friends in realizing how important friends are into a support system. So just someone you can
That's
chat with
awesome.
and talk to.
Yeah.
So
Well, that goes
friends
very
is my year.
That is incredible. That goes very much with my word of the year, which is community. And I think those are very similar. And building communities where we have more friends in them, more relationships. So thank you for being part of our community. And I will shout out to Zolk, whose word is gratitude, and say we're grateful for all of the things that you're doing for this community. So thanks for being with us today.
It was great to be here, and thank you.
Thank you.
Night.
Thanks, everyone. Be safe and take care.